Okay, grab yourself a cheese and pickle sandwich and a cold drink, and let's talk about sound design on the Synclavier Regen. So lots of possibilities for sound design, and we're going to start with additive. Well, we're going to start with a blank slate, so we're going to cut all the tracks, we know there's nothing there, and then we'll start working on timbre 1, or track 1 I should say, and we'll start building a timbre. So timbres are built with up to 12 partials. To sound a partial, there's going to be nothing now when I press the keyboard. I don't know if the keyboard's in shot particularly, but anyway. Double tap one of those, I get the default of 0 dB volume, and I get the default of a sine wave. Why? Because that's what's selected, an additive waveform. So these are our different possibilities for sound design per partial. So yeah, we'll start with additive. I can change the tuning, which I don't want to. I'm going to keep that default. There's going to be nothing crazy going on here yet, at least. And here are my possibilities to get me started. So the sine wave, as I said, and then triangle, square. When you change parameters in Regen, there always a crossfade or a morph between one and the other, so that everything is as smooth as possible. And that's with every single parameter, so that during a performance you can change things to your heart's content live, and it won't be a problem. The wavetables are computed on the fly and then blended between the two, for example, in this case. So when we change this, we'll see on the graphical display our handy harmonics. So that's how a square wave looks in the frequency domain, for example, and a ramp and an impulse. And if we want to look at that in the time domain, we can just pop to here and you'll see, oh, there's our little square wave. Once we've got something that we want to work with, or we can start with a sine wave. If we go over here, you'll see if I'm going right now, I'm actually changing to the edit, and then I want to change harmonics. I'm going to the define. And the harmonics are in 3 banks of 8, so this is our square wave, but let's mess around with it. So let's pull down these harmonics, and you can see it goes a chartreuse colour. Magenta is again to select them. So let's take these out. I don't want these harmonics. See what that sounds like. Probably doesn't look a lot different. Yeah, it's just a wobbly square wave. Okay, well, let's take a few more out. Cleaner, isn't it? Yeah, I like that. That's pretty cool. Oops. Oh, I pressed that. We can try changing the phases. So these are the carrier phases. So if we change these phases, well, let's change 4 of them, otherwise it won't really make any difference from it. A lot more subtle when you change the phases for this kind of waveform. What you're doing with sound design on this machine is you're kind of using your fingers and your ears to fine tune what kind of the sound you want. Maybe you're adding tremolo or vibrato, or in this case changing the actual waveform. And you might be looking at this and going, oh, this is 98 degrees out of phase, or something like that. You certainly have that to look at as a guide, but you're also using more your right side of your brain to feel through something. I actually think there might be some master reverb on. Why do I think that? Yeah. Okay, well, we'll take the master reverb off, and we'll go back to editing the phases again. That's pretty strong. That's pretty strong. So that's pretty much all you can do for the the additive things, but the neat thing is that you can, okay, so I'll toggle that off. The neat thing is that I could have lots of different additive waveforms doing different things, and then I can modulate them. So that's one of the building blocks. Is here I've been changing the carrier waveform. We're back on part. Let's go back on partial 1 for this. I can add a modulating waveform. So if I want to, I can change that in the same way. here, not going to make any difference. Until I add some FM amount. So I go back to my level, or I go to my levels. Remember when we set the partial to be 0, I can set the modulator level as well. So the FM. Let's see what that's doing to the waveform as well. A little goes a long way. Okay, and I can change the envelope of that. So if I make it, let's exaggerate it, I'll make it very kind of distorted. Let's give it a long attack. Let's give it, you know, almost a second attack, something like that. So the FM comes in and maybe it quiesces to quite a small. Yeah, let's give it that much. But let's quiesce to a small amount because again a little bit long. You can hear the envelope now. You can see the envelope, what it's doing here. So that's showing both envelopes. That's the decay on the volume envelope, and then the blue one is the FM envelope. So if we go back to these guys, you can see what kind of different modulator waves cause. Sorry. Oh yeah, that's even more gnarly. Yeah, so maybe I like that one the best actually for the sound that I'm creating. So, doesn't stop there. As you can imagine, the rabbit hole goes deep. But let's quickly explore a different paradigm of sound design. Go back to our wave, and we'll do that on partial too. So now let's look at a different synth mode. Sorry, I'm on the modulator wave. So the modulator wave, I've only got additive synth wave, additive as a synth mode. I can change the type of waveform it is, but oftentimes the modulator wave doesn't really make too much of a difference. You heard a different character there, but you can't really go too far beyond that. So on the carrier waveform, I've also got a subtractive, which will explore samples, and then the hybrid, which is starts with a sample and then it goes to frame-based additive, which typically is because you've analysed your sample and you've gone into resynthesis. So we'll cover that a little bit later. What we'll do now is subtractive. So this paradigm, again, I can change my tuning, go to the next page, I'm on edit. These are the different waveforms that I can have of subtractive. So instead of additive being building up all those different harmonics and seeing how they behave and interact, or in what I did was start with a square wave and then cut some out, but typically you would add from a sine wave and then you would add different harmonics of that fundamental. With subtractive, I'm not going to say more traditional because they're both different paradigms, but you start with a complex wave. So you start with, in this case, noise or a square wave or a supersaw, which has lots of harmonics, and then you would filter some of those out in different ways and you would shape your sound that way. So a lot of people know subtractive and fewer people, it seems, know additive, but we're going to show you what the Regen supports for subtractive. So default is a supersaw, so we'll start with that. I'm going to solo this partial, so just like the tracks, you can solo stuff, and when you're building on things, building up sounds, you want to just hear that one sound probably. So again, set the volume to something that we'll just set it up all the way so we can hear it clearly while we're working on it. There's our supersaw. Why is it moving like that? It's because it's several saws at once. So there's 3 voices. I can change it to 1. That's a supersaw. Noisy thing. There's the chord. Now, lots going on. We can filter that. So if we go back to here, there's a simple little filter built in, like a roll-off filter. Just so you can start to shape it, and you'll see what happens now as the waveform as I change it. So I can do a high pass, and that still sounds like a saw wave, and it sounds like a saw wave generated by analog equipment more so than digital, because the saws aren't perfect and there's rise times and they're going through capacitors and things like that. So that high pass filter sort of mimics that, and again a little goes a long way, I think. And then if I go all the way the other way, it's low pass, and that's taking out some of that harmonic content. So it's obviously keeping the lower frequencies. A little goes a long way, so I'm just going to get something I'm happy with. Now, if I want to add more voices, the filter is being applied to these, all of them, because basically those three are being added. And they're detuned. One of them's in tune, and the other two are detuned, and you can hear I can really detune it. You just hear a little bit of movement there. And the three voices can also be spread or not spread in the stereo domain. So you're adding a bit of stereo content right at the source with this if you want to. So let's go with that super saw, and then let's show what can be done with the, well, we've got three filters. One we just added, which was the roll-off filter. Now if I go and press the timbre filter, I'm going to take soloing off. What I'll do is I'll just take that one out for now, and we'll go back to this timbre filter. So if I add a low pass filter there, you can instantly hear what that does. I can get it to pitch track. So I can change my amount of pitch tracking here, and you'll see what happens on the graphical display is that the keys that I press show me where the cutoff is going to be depending on the key I press across the keyboard, and that moves. But if I take pitch tracking off, I think, yeah, just default it to 1, default it again to off. So if I double tap things, often I get the default. Now the cutoff's not going to change, I've got no pitch tracking. Sometimes you want a little bit, sometimes you want it to be unity, which means that the cutoff frequency will change in accordance with the frequency change of the incoming MIDI. That will be 1. So I've got half here, 0.5 pitch tracking. But let's make the filter more interesting. Let's add some resonance. We'll change the cutoff to be higher up so I'm getting more of the content. So that much resonance. We can, if I go, sorry, if I press the blue button, it's now the back button. I'm going to just change that to a steeper, basically a steeper cutoff, a different type of frequency response. So it's a 24 dB per octave cutoff instead of a 12 dB. And then I'll go back into filter setting. When I do that, you can see what happens to this button here. So sounds a little bit different. The 24 dB, that's the one I want. We can add some movement into it. If I go back, I can change the envelope, and I can change the way it starts. You get that classic kind of analog synthy sound. And I actually want to slow down the attack a bit on this because I want to hear some of that FM. And because this is a timbre frequency, when I put my other one back in, and I add some volume to that guy, this one, that's going to get filtered too. It's going to get filtered by the timbre filter, which is going to filter all of them. That was actually a little bit louder. And I can change, if I want to balance the volumes, I've got a timbre volume here. That's too loud. That is flashing to show me that I've got something soloed. So now that additive and subtractive waveform is blending quite well. Of course, there's lots more, and I can't show you every feature here in this short video, but there's lots more things you can do to the partials. So I have various effects here. I have chorus. I can add that to just one of my partials. Creates another voice detuned. So both of them are now detuned actually, because there was a kind of chorus on the subtractive one. I'm getting a little bit more thickness in the sound. And I've got my vibrato and tremolo there. So what I can do is add some vibrato to both of them. I'll just select them both. And we will add a depth. Since you add a depth, it defaults to 5 Hz. Let's speed that below it. There you go. That's exaggerated, of course. Well, it's exaggerated, but one thing you can do is change it for the amount of velocity or pressure or something like that, so that the range of which you get would be less. So, yeah, if I go with velocity, this keyboard isn't pressure sensitive, I don't believe. Edit that, and I can map it to vibrato. Find my vibrato, or just go boink there, and it goes to vibrato depth. And I want that to apply to, well, currently it's applying to everything, but I want the range. Yeah, let's say we want to start some vibrato on 1. So I select 1. Sorry, I actually select 1, it's magenta, and then I say 28. That's going to start with some vibrato. As this goes towards the right, it's more velocity. So I'm tapping the keys slightly slower and then higher. So partial 1 is going to start with some vibrato always, partial 0 isn't. Partial 0, I can actually reduce the range though. And that's showing all the other partials, but I'm actually not using them. So what I can do is, these toggle when I press them, so I can just get rid of all of those and you don't see that line. So you can see what the two partials are doing, regards vibrato, because that's press blue again, that's what I mapped it to. So, for example, so yeah, lots of different effects, on the partials, vibrato, tremolo, chorus, and then on here there's different effects that can be applied. Sorry, on here there's different effects that can be applied at a timbre level, including the reverb, which we've already seen, things like bit crusher and so on and so forth. And then the modulators can help you map them for different partials. So that concludes very, very basic sound design. We didn't really talk much about the envelopes, so the envelopes are available here on a per partial basis. The next video I'm going to talk about samples, and then maybe we'll get into the resynthesis stuff as well. Very much a bird's eye view. Okay, thanks for watching.